Bienvenidas, bienvenidos, and happy Women's History Month. Welcome to today's Arts and Lectures entitled Crossing Borders, Immigration, and the American Dream, featuring Reina Grande. Today's presentation will be 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of questions and answers, ending at 1 o'clock. I'm Rhonda Findling from the EOPS program here, and it's a great honor to introduce to you today, all the way from Los Angeles, author, educator, and speaker, Reina Grande. Her novels, Across 100 Mountains and Dancing with Butterflies, have been read widely in schools across the country. In her latest book, a moving and painfully raw personal memoir, The Distance Between Us, Reina writes about her life before and after crossing the border from Mexico at the age of 10. She later went on to become the first person in her family to graduate from college. Reina has received several awards for her books, and her works have been published internationally in countries such as Norway and South Korea. After attending Pasadena City College, Reina obtained her BA in creative writing and film and video from UC Santa Cruz. She later received her MFA in creative writing from Antioch University. Currently, Reina teaches creative writing at UCLA Extension and is at work on her next novel. A book signing will take place after the presentation today in the lobby, where you can also purchase her memoir, and then following that at the SRJC bookstore. Let's give a warm welcome to Reina Grande.
Wow. Buenas tardes. Thank you so much for being here today and for coming to my presentation. And thank you, Rhonda, for making this happen. Thank you to the Santa Rosa Junior College and the Puente program and all the other sponsors of this great event. I am always very happy to come up here, and I'm really excited just to be here in front of you beautiful people. Very looking forward to your questions. So what I'm gonna do is I'll try not to take up 45 minutes because I do wanna give more time for questions. So I'll shorten my presentation a little bit just to give you more time. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. What I wanna do is the topic of the presentation today is the American dream. And for me, my dream, of course, was to become an author, to become a published writer. And I can say right now, I'm living that dream. And it has been a long journey, but I think it's also has been a very rewarding journey where I learned a lot about the person that I wanted to be. And I think at this point right now, I'm getting closer to that person that I want to be. I'm not quite there yet. Those of you who watched the Oscars last night, I don't know if you saw when Matthew McConaughey got his award, and he was talking about that hero and how he kept looking at himself 10 years from now, 10 years from now, 10 years from now. And that just resonated with me because I think I kind of operate in that same way, where I'm always thinking about myself, like, who do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? And that has really helped me to keep moving forward with my life, to set goals for myself. So to me, it's always been an important thing to visualize the kind of future that I want to have, to visualize the kind of person that I want to be. And that, to me, is the American dream of not so much having things, but it's more about becoming the person that I want to be. So in terms of my dream of becoming a writer, it actually, I would say, that it started many, many years ago when I was still a little girl in Mexico. For those of you who have read the memoir, you're very familiar with my story, and I know there's some of you who haven't had the chance yet, so I'll tell you a little bit about what's in the book And I'm gonna try to focus more on the things that shaped me as a writer. That kind of set the tone for me for later choosing to pursue that career. So when I was in Mexico, I was born into a very poor family, and I was born in a little shack made of sticks and cardboard with a dirt floor, no running water, no electricity. When I was 2 years old, my father decided to come to the U.S. to pursue his own American dream, which was to earn enough money to be able to build us a real house. And what he considered a real house was a house made of brick and concrete, not like the little shack where I was born. And one of my favorite stories of when I was born is that when my mother had me, she asked the midwife to bury my umbilical cord in that dirt floor so that no matter where life took me, I would never forget where I came from. And that idea has always been a very powerful idea for me, because I think through my writing, I kind of honor my mother's wish, and I have never forgotten where I came from. So my father, his dream was to be able to give us something better, and for him it was building us this brick house. And he came here when I was 2, and a few years later he sent for my mother so that she could help him work, and together they would be able to earn the money that he needed for the house. So he called her and said, I want you here by my side. And my mother packed up my stuff and my siblings' stuff, and she went and dropped us off at my grandmother's house. And then she said goodbye, and she came here to the U.S. And for me, that was a very devastating moment, because I had already lost my father to the U.S. I didn't remember him because he left when I was 2, so my earliest memories don't include my father anymore. He was an absent father. He was a black and white photograph hanging on the wall. But when my mother left, to me, that was a really devastating moment, because I didn't want to lose the only parent I had left, and yet I had to lose her too. And I was very angry at my father for taking her away from me just because he wanted, a stupid house. And it took me a long time to understand what my father's dream meant to him. And what really helped me to understand my father's dream eventually was that I turned to stories as a way to try to understand. And in Mexico, we didn't have a television, we had a radio. And every night at 7 o'clock, we would listen to story time, where they would have stories like fairy tales and fables, folk tales. And my siblings and I loved to listen to story time on the radio. And I remember one time when they had the story of the 3 little pigs, and how much it impacted me, because as you guys know, the first 2 pigs that get eaten by the big bad wolf are the pigs that live in shacks, like the shack where I lived. But the pig that survives the wolf is the one that lives in the brick house. And when I heard that story, I remember for the first time understanding my father's dream of having a brick house. And I understood that for him, it wasn't so much as being able to build a house made of brick and concrete. It was about him feeling that he was a good provider, that he could take care of his family, that he could give us something better. And that's what that house symbolized to him. So after that, I just love listening to stories, because in some way or another, I could always find a little bit of my experience in them, and I could learn from them. And that's, to me, when people ask me, like, how did you become a writer? Why did you become a writer? I always kind of point to that one moment where a story really opened my eyes to things and helped me to understand the world around me. And after that, I just used stories as a way to survive. That was my survival tactic, was to turn to stories and let them guide me, let them help me to understand. So that was one particular moment in my life that I found very meaningful, and I think that's something that as a writer I kind of try to do that too with my own stories, where I want people who maybe find themselves a little lost, a little not able to understand things, that maybe when they read my work it helps them to find a little bit more meaning and understanding. So what I'm going to do is I would like to read to you a little excerpt from the book. My memoir is divided into two sections. The first half takes place in Mexico, and it deals with my experience of being left behind by my parents and what that was like. And the second half of the book deals with me coming to the U.S. as an undocumented immigrant when I was 9.5 to be reunited with my father. And it deals with that separation and what it did to my family. So I'll read to you an excerpt right now, and that takes place in the first half of the book, and it's about my father's dream house. And what I did with the memoir was I put in family photographs. And this picture, I know you guys are kind of far away, but this is a black and white photograph of my father. And it was an 8x10 photograph we had hanging on the wall. And this was the only way I could remember that I still had a father during the 8 years that he was gone. And I got so used to seeing him in black and white that when he finally came back and I saw him in real person, in real life, I was so shocked that he was in color. So I started to call him the man behind the glass, because that's kind of what he was to me for 8 years. So this chapter is about my father's dream house. Okay. My father had told us about his dream house in the letters he sent to my mother from El Otro Lado. The house was made of brick, with a shiny concrete floor and tall white windows to let in the sunlight. The walls were painted the color of Mommy's blue eyeshadow, and it had 3 rooms. Papi's dream house had a television, a stereo, a refrigerator, and a stove. It was a house with electricity, gas, and running water, and maybe even an indoor bathroom, one with a shower that made you feel as if you were standing in the rain on a sticky, hot summer day. That was the house that my father dreamed of. Back then, I didn't know that Guerrero was the Mexican state with the most people immigrating due to the scarcity of jobs. I hadn't known that a year before he left, my father had already been leaving home to find construction work in Acapulco, Mexico City, even as far as Mazatlan, Sinaloa, until eventually making his way farther north. At first, he had lived in California's Central Valley and had slept in an abandoned car while working in the fields harvesting crops, just as he had done in his youth. Eventually, he left to try his luck in Los Angeles, where he was fortunate enough to find himself a stable job as a maintenance worker at a retirement home. 4 years after my father left for the United States, and 2 years after my mother left, the construction of our house finally began. Back then, I interpreted this to mean one thing: Papi and Mommy would soon be back. Workers came early one morning to tear down the outhouse and the shack in which I was born. Both the shack and the outhouse were made of bamboo sticks, so it didn't take long to get rid of them. I stood there watching, sad that my little shack was being destroyed. My sister put an arm around me and said, "Just think about what is going to be built right there on that spot." The workers returned the next day and the day after and the day after and began to lay the foundation, and after that, the walls. As soon as school let out, Mago, Carlos, and I would run down the hill to help out as much as we could. My grandfather handed each of us a bucket, and we carried bucketfuls of gravel and mortar. Carlos worked especially hard. He liked working side by side with our grandfather. He wanted our grandfather to be proud of him for being quick and steady, not like us girls who were too slow and clumsy with the bricks and the buckets of mortar. But my grandfather didn't pay much attention to Carlos. We scraped our fingers carrying bricks. At night, we couldn't sleep from being so sore. But every day we put all of our energy into building our house, and when our fingers hurt too much or our knees wanted to buckle under the weight of the buckets of wet mortar we carried to the bricklayers, we would tell ourselves that the faster we worked, the faster we would have a family again. That thought gave us strength. But it wasn't long before the workers stopped coming. By the time February came to an end, the workers were nowhere in sight. My grandmother said our parents had no more money, so the house had to wait. We stood by the door every morning before going to school, hoping to see the truck that brought the construction workers bumping and jerking its way down the dirt road. Then we headed to school, where all we did was look out the window and sigh the hours away, leaning our sorrow on our elbows. By the end of the week, Mago stopped looking down the dirt road. She pushed Carlos and me up the hill and told us that it didn't matter anyway. She said that no matter how many bricks and buckets of mortar we helped carry to the bricklayers, the house would never be done because it was just a foolish dream, just as silly as our dream of having a real family again. It will get finished, Carlos said. They will come back. He took up running up the hill, and by the time we got to the gate of our school, he was nowhere in sight. When we got back from school, I went inside my grandfather's room to look at the man behind the glass. "How much longer?" I asked him. "How much longer will you be gone?" As always, there was no answer. Thank you. So the answer to my question about how much longer was actually like 8 years. That's how long it took for my father to finally be able to build us the house. But by the time the house was finished, a lot of things had changed. And some of those things were out of his control. Like, for example, Mexico was going through a very deep recession due to the national debt crisis. The peso was devalued several times while my father was gone. There were no jobs, and people were coming here. And that's why, as you've heard about the largest wave of immigration from Mexico that just came to a standstill recently, for a big part of that wave, the reason why people were coming here was because of the economy in Mexico having tanked and people not having any jobs. So because of that, my father was unable to come back to Mexico because there was really not a whole lot to come back to in terms of employment and opportunities. And he had found a job as a maintenance worker in LA, and he didn't want to give up that job. Another thing that happened during the 8 years that my father was gone was that my parents split up when my mother got here. One of the reasons why my mom came here was because she wanted to protect her marriage. She had heard a lot of stories about the men who come here and forget about the wives and their children that they leave behind. And she wanted to come here to make sure that didn't happen to her. And yet, a year or so after she got here, my father left her for another woman. So the family that my siblings and I dreamed about in Mexico no longer existed. It's completely broken. And eventually, my mother, she came back to Mexico a very, very different kind of person, very heartbroken, bitter woman. And my father, what he did to her was very, very painful, and it affected our relationship with our mother. And eventually she found someone else, so she remarried, and of course my father remarried, and so our family was not what it had been back in Mexico before my father came here.